Good day, everyone. Good day.
Hello.
Hello, good evening. How are you?
Very, very good evening, good afternoon, good morning.
Good afternoon, good morning.
Hello everyone, greetings.
Greetings, Dr. Swarup. Thank you for joining us. It's John here.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Nice to see Adene, Dr. Nelson. Thank you very much for joining us. And all our other wonderful academics. Dr. Moreau, thank you. June, thank you for joining us. Kenji from New Zealand. It's wonderful. I'm just looking through quickly all the names, and I'm excited to see you. Santosh is with us.
Welcome to
Yes,
everyone.
Fuji.
Thank you.
Greg, you need to unmute yourself.
You are still muted.
Okay, unmuted
Here
now?
we go. Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. So a very, very warm welcome to you all from all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us for this Universal Peace Federation Asia Pacific webinar. And today's program is an initiative of the International Association of Academicians for Peace, IAAP, which is a project of UPF. So the overall theme today is the United Nations Charter at a Crossroads, renewing commitment to universal values, multilateralism, and diplomacy in an era of global uncertainty. So my name is Greg Stone. I am the director of UPF Oceania, and it's my very great pleasure to be your MC for this program. Now, the International Association of Academicians for Peace is a global interdisciplinary academic initiative aimed at contributing towards the realization of a world of lasting peace. So today's webinar is commemorating the United Nations International Day of Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace that promotes peaceful dispute resolution, international cooperation, and adherence to the UN Charter. This special day is celebrated annually on April the 24th. We have a very distinguished panel of excellent speakers who will each share their thoughts based on today's theme. So as we get underway, it's my great pleasure to introduce the President of Universal Peace Federation International, Dr. Chaj Haldeen Hamid, to give his welcoming remarks to everyone. So Dr. Hamid is a former director of the Office of the United Nations and International Relations of UPF, his main representative to the UN for over 2 decades. He's also chairman of the World Association of Non-Governmental Organizations, WONGO. So please give him a very
Thank you, Greg. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Thank you, Greg, and it's good to hear your Australian accent. Esteemed presenters, dear colleagues and friends, warm greetings from New York, the city which never sleeps. Thank you for the invitation and my sincere appreciation to our organizer in Oceania and the Asia Pacific for convening this timely discussion. The United Nations International Day of Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace remind us of a simple but demanding truth. Peace does not sustain itself. It must be built patiently and continuously through dialogue, cooperation, restraint, and responsible leadership. In UPF's frame of work, this responsibility is reflected in three guiding principles: interdependent, mutual prosperity, and universal values. Multilateralism requires interdependence because no notion can secure peace alone. Diplomacy requires mutual prosperity because exclusion and inequality inevitably lead to instability. And both depend on universal values because cooperation cannot endure without a shared commitment to human dignity. Thanks to our distinguished speakers for offering their insights and approach these challenges from critical perspectives: global governance, ethical leadership, human rights in the age of artificial intelligence, and the connections between multilateralism, health, security, and sustainable development. Together, they remind us that the issues we face are not separate. They are deeply interconnected, and so must be our responses. The theme, the UN Charter at the Crossroads, captures our moment well. We live in a time marked by conflict, mistrust, and rapid technological changes. Institutions are under strain. The United Nations, like all human institutions, is not without limitations. Yet it remains the most comprehensive framework humanity has created for the pursuit of peace. The UN Charter still provides essential guidance: restraint instead of escalation, dialogue instead of isolation, and respect for human dignity instead of the use of force. It reminds us that peace requires shared responsibility, what we in UPF understand as interdependence in action. In this context, IAAP has a vital role. While policymakers and diplomats respond to immediate pressure, academicians can step back to clarify principles, to test assumptions, and to connect present decisions with long-term consequences. IAAP brings intellectual depth and ethical reflection into the global conversation on peace. At the same time, IAAP has an important opportunity before it. Over many years, UPF has accumulated valuable experiences in dialogue and cooperation across cultures and regions. This experience should be clearly articulated and developed into a coherent and practical vision of peace, one that can be shared beyond our own network. As we look towards 2027, this raises an important question. What lasting contribution can UPF offer to the wider world? I believe one answer is the development of a clear, principled, and actionable framework for peace. In this effort, IAAP can serve as a global intellectual forum and think tank, helping to identify realistic pathway that others can follow. For those new to UPF, our approach is simple. We seek to connect values with action, dialogue with policy, and cooperation with tangible service, especially in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. To our long-standing partners, particularly in Asia and Oceania, I offer my deep appreciation for your years of commitment and partnership. The issues before us, governors, leadership, human rights, technology, health, and development, may appear diverse, but they all point to the same essential need: cooperation that can be trusted, leadership grounded in moral responsibility, and respect for the dignity of every human being. UPF was founded by Dr. Hagja Han and her late Dr. Sun Myung Moon on the conviction that peace advances when we live for the sake of others and recognize humanity as one family under God. For us, this is not only an ideal, it is a guide for action. Let me conclude with this thought. If we are serious about peace, then multilateralism cannot remain only a system of institutions. It must become a shared practice of responsibility. A responsibility to listen before we act, to cooperate before we compete, and to uphold human dignity above all interest. If we can do that, then multilateralism will not be at the crossroads. It will be a pathway forward. I thank you for listening, and God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamad, for those welcoming remarks, and especially for outlining very clearly UPF perspective on these issues. And please give my regards to Josephine, your wife, who's also an Aussie who I have known well. Thank you very much. Okay, now our next presenter is Dr. Augusto Lopez Claros. He is an international economist and executive director of the Global Governance Forum. He was previously chief economist at the World Economic Forum, where he directed the Global Competitiveness Program and edited the Global Competitiveness Report, the forum's flagship publication. He will speak on our first topic, the Global Governance Forum's drafting of a second United Nations Charter. Now, after Dr. Lopez Claros' presentation, there'll be an opportunity for question and answer to him. So please place your questions in the chat and we'll select some of them and present them to Dr. Lopez Claros. So please join me now in welcoming Dr. Augusto Lopez Claros to give with a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg, for your kind introduction. I'm actually traveling, and in the United States this week, I had the pleasure of participating yesterday at an event hosted by the Austrian mission to the United Nations, focused on Security Council reform, which of course is part of the proposals put forward by the Global Governance Forum in a second United Nations Charter. I will come to that in a few minutes, but let me begin, as I actually began my remarks yesterday at the Austrian embassy. At the San Francisco conference in 1945, President Truman, on June 26, decided to close the conference, saying something that I think is very relevant even today. He said that this charter, like our own constitution, will be expanded and improved as time goes on. No one claims that it is now a final or perfect instrument. Changing world conditions will require readjustments. This is, at some level, it's a very, very obvious statement to make. Institutions have to evolve, they have to adapt to changing world circumstances. And we accept that as a general principle. I don't think it is particularly questioned today, particularly in the 20th century and the 21st century, when we are going through a period of great change and transformation, scientific and technological innovation. Adaptability, is something that we accept as some necessary to remain relevant. And yet, as you know, the United Nations Charter has remained largely unchanged since 1945. And so the motivation for this initiative launched by the Global Governance Forum 3 years ago essentially was in response to a perception that the institutions that we have to strengthen international cooperation and to allow us to deal with the global risks that we face are no longer fit for purpose. They are no longer delivering the kinds of solutions that we need in our interconnected and troubled world. In a way, you could say that since 1945, the institutions that we have, the UN and all the associated organizations that support its work, including organizations that are quite powerful like the World Bank and the IMF, they have evolved gradually. They have reformed in some ways, but the world and the complexity underpinning our global society has increased, of course, exponentially. And a whole range of global problems have appeared, which our institutions are struggling to cope with. In a way, you could say that what we're facing is a kind of a growing governance gap, an increasing inability of the institutions that we have, including, of course, the United Nations, to deal with the global challenges that we face. And I don't have the time today to make a list for you of what are some of these global challenges. You are as familiar with them as I am. We have a climate crisis, not to call it a climate emergency. We have heightening tensions between the superpowers, our nuclear order has unraveled in recent decades. We have entered into a period of renewed militarism and arms spending. We have a global economy which has a financial system that is vulnerable. We have had serious crises, as you know. We had the 2007, 2008 global financial crisis. Another crisis in the future is not impossible and could well be, more intense than the previous one because of, vulnerabilities in our global financial system. And then, of course, we have continued worsening of inequality. We have a persistent problem of extreme poverty, malnutrition, and so on. And the list is long. I could go on. My point here is that these problems are global in nature. They cannot be solved outside of a context of stronger international cooperation. And we simply don't have that at the moment. And therefore, the Global Governance Forum convened a group of experts about 3 years ago to essentially ask ourselves, if we were to modernize the UN system, if we were to bring the UN into the 21st century and enhance its ability to cope with global problems, what would the underlying charter look like? How would we amend the 1945 document, which in its own time was highly significant and a very important step forward in terms of trying to create a context for stronger international cooperation? What would those changes look like? And that is what I hope to do over the next 12 or 13 minutes, just to give you a kind of a flavor of the issues that we address. And obviously, in 15 minutes, I don't have the time to give you a comprehensive overview of all the changes that we have proposed. Let me just say that this document, titled A Second United Nations Charter, Modernizing the UN for a New Generation, is actually available on the homepage of the Global Governance Forum. You can download it. It's a PDF. It's an annotated copy of what a second UN Charter could look like, meaning that we explain to you, all the changes that we are proposing to the language of the original Charter, and we justify these changes, I think, with fairly solid and coherent arguments. Okay, so let me just briefly say we made 3 kinds of changes to the Charter. First of all, we had what we call legacy updates. These are the low-hanging fruit in the Charter. The Charter refers to enemy states. Japan and Germany are enemy states. The Charter has a number of chapters which are no longer operational. They dealt in time with the process of decolonization, the trusteeship system. Those chapters have been essentially dead letter for decades, and so we deleted all those things which are simply a burden on the document. But that was the easy part, and it's not something that I would like to emphasize too much at this point. However, a second kind of change that we did is what we call normative advances. We raised or mainstreamed the concept of gender equality throughout the chapter, so that we are going to prevent the emergence of situations like we have today, where although we have had something like 80 presidents of the General Assembly, only 5 of them in the entire history of the organization have been women, 75 of them have been men, and this is just not right, not right in the 21st century. We have elevated the whole issue of human rights in the revised or the second charter. The original 1945 chapter does recognize human rights as a new area of concern of the United Nations. In 1948, we had the Universal Declaration, but we have strengthened that entire portfolio in the new charter. essentially to address what I call the Amartya Sen criticism of human rights. Amartya Sen, a very well-known, very famous, respected economist, Nobel laureate, has said that unless we have an agency that can deliver human rights to people and turn these rights into lived realities, then human rights, he said, are just heartwarming sentiments. They are things that we say to each other. We quote the Universal Declaration, but we have countries like Iran, which discriminate against religious minorities, like the Baha'i community, which is the largest religious minority in Iran. They discriminate against women. We have countries like Afghanistan, where the plight of women is absolutely horrific. And these countries have, as UN members, they are committed to respecting people's religious freedoms and not to discriminate on basis of gender, of ethnicity, and so on. And yet, they remain members of the UN system in violation of some of its most basic principles. So in the second charter, we strengthen considerably this by essentially elevating the whole area of human rights and giving it a great deal more prominence, so that under the second charter, a country like Iran or Afghanistan, for instance, although I could give you more examples, would never serve on a Human Rights Council, which now has its own dedicated chapter within the revised charter that we have put forward. And then in the same spirit, we introduce a new chapter on something that we call the Earth System Council. The 1945 charter does not mention the word environment. The focus in 1945 was peace and security. It's not to say that we didn't know that the greenhouse effect was already in operation. We have known the greenhouse effect since the late 19th century. The Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius actually won a Nobel Prize in chemistry in 1907 because of his discovery of and the development of a very nifty formula connecting concentration of carbon dioxide with increases in average temperature. That formula remains valid 100 years later. But in 1945, the focus was peace and security. Climate was not in the radar screen of policymakers. It was not perceived as a threat to human civilization. Today it is. And therefore, in the new charter, we have a chapter called the Earth System Council. And the idea here is to create a council within the UN, in addition to the Security Council, in addition to the Economic and Social Council, that will coordinate global environmental policy, will harmonize international environmental law, will oversee negotiation and implementation of global environmental standards. In other words, it will bring a degree of coherence and order to what is a very fragmented and very dispersed environmental legislation, which of course is not working because emissions have continued to rise. 1.5 degrees is out of reach, the scientists tell us, and it is an area of great concern. Let me very quickly, in passing, mention 2 or 3 additional reforms or innovations that we introduced in the charter, which are of the structural kind. They are not legacy updates. They are not normative advances. They are structural changes. And I could, in a longer version of this presentation, I actually go through a list of 10 important changes that we are proposing in this revised charter. Let me just mention quickly, in passing, 3 of them. One has to do with a change in the underlying nature of the organization. The UN, when it was set up in 1945, was set up as an organization of states. And we think that the UN in the 21st century, reflecting the improvements in governance that have taken place over the past century, should become an organization of states and peoples. And we do this by proposing the creation of a parliamentary assembly attached to the General Assembly. So the General Assembly remains a body of states, one country, one vote, if you wish, for now. But we elect a parliamentary assembly, which is made up of representatives either from the parliaments of the national governments, the member states, or directly elected. In the European Union, for instance, we have had already many decades of experience directly electing the members of the European Parliament. And the European Parliament, which in the 1950s was called the European Parliamentary Assembly and was largely an advisory body, in time has become a very important legislative body. The members are elected directly via popular vote in the member states. They are elected under the principle of digressive proportionality, which means that Germany gets more parliamentarians than Malta, but Malta gets proportionally more. In other words, the idea is essentially to boost the participation in the assembly of the smaller states, and we use exactly the same principle in our proposal for a parliamentary assembly, which means that India and China get more parliamentarians than Paraguay and Martinique, but proportionally less so that the body is not dominated by Indian and Chinese members, who account for close to 38% of the world's population. So this is an important innovation. It's a way of strengthening the democratic legitimacy of the UN, and therefore strengthening the capacity for innovation within the organization. As I said before, yesterday I was at the Austrian mission. They have an annual meeting on Security Council reform, and I do want to give you the gist of what we're proposing on the Security Council, because it's a hot topic of discussion these days. I have, over the last year and a half, 2 years, I have met with countless UN missions in New York. Just in September and November, I met 25 missions in New York, often at the ambassador level. And when you bring to the table the issue of UN reform, very quickly to the top of the list comes the issue of reform of the Security Council, because it is perceived as having contributed to the dysfunctionality, not just of the council. I'm referring in particular to the power of the veto of the permanent members, but by making the Security Council dysfunctional, and because the Security Council is the main center of power in the UN system, it has contributed to undermine the credibility of the entire organization. So you see more and more UN ambassadors saying that if we don't reform the Security Council, it's going to turn the United Nations into a gradually, marginally unimportant organization, which is going to be on the sidelines of most major crises and in the world, and that was obviously not the intention of the founders. The founders' intention was that the UN would be at the very center of problem solving, and especially in the area of peace and security, but also in the area of economic and social development and so on. So in our proposals, we address both questions, the issue of representation, the issue of the veto. On the issue of the representation, we are saying that we should expand the membership from 15 members to 25 members. We allow the 5 permanent members to keep their permanent status, and we even allow them to keep the veto, although we constrain it in important ways, and I will come to that in a minute. And then what we do is we create 5 additional positions, which are 6-year renewable terms, and each of these positions goes to one of the 5 regions of the world which the UN uses for classifying its membership. So I am Latin American. In my part of the world, most likely Brazil would get that 6-year renewable position, because Brazil is got the biggest population, it has the largest GDP in Latin America, and therefore Brazil de facto would become a permanent member of the Security Council, because that position would be renewed every 6 years. And so the same is true for the other 4 regions of the world. And then we create 15 additional positions. These are 3-year non-renewable, and the 15 countries are allocated in proportion to the number of countries in each region of the world. So Africa, for instance, gets 5 slots, all right? So these reforms address in a very meaningful, very substantial, very practical way, the whole question of representation. Africa in particular, which is underrepresented in the Council, they get 1 6-year renewable and they get 5 3-year non-renewable. So they have a substantial presence in the Council. Let me, before I come and tell you what we do with the veto, let me say that in our deliberations in putting together the second charter, we did consider seriously the question of the veto. As you know, there are a number of proposals. The African Union, for instance, has proposals which call for 2 permanent seats for Africa with veto power. And I must tell you that we did not wish as a group to extend the veto power to other members beyond the existing 5, which is a kind of a historical legacy from 1945. And I think we have very good reasons for this. One of them, of course, is that it entrenches hierarchy rather than reforming it. If you're going to reform the Council, how can you call it a reform if you're essentially making the Council even more dysfunctional than it already is with 5 permanent members? It also shields geopolitical allies. So this is kind of an impunity risk. You know that one of the problems with the veto is that a country like Russia can shield one of its allies, Syria, in 2011, and prevent the UN from action in Syria, prevent 500,000 casualties over the following decade, this was widely anticipated at the time that the veto was introduced in 1945, that the UN would be impotent to solve problems between the major powers and their client states. Of course, the veto also contradicts sovereign equality. This is an important principle of the Charter. And so giving the veto to more countries, is like a normative inconsistency. And of course, in periods of crisis, it raises the decision thresholds, So it may lead to what we economists call a collective action failure, because if we have more countries with more veto power, then it makes the solution in particular crisis even more difficult, because the possibilities that somebody will block a pathway for solution is increased, and so on. So what do we do? What we do, and I will illustrate. What we do is we say, okay, a permanent member may veto a resolution in the Security Council, but if they do so, this resolution goes to the General Assembly, or if the Parliamentary Assembly has already been elected to a joint session of the General Assembly and the Parliamentary Assembly, but let's for now just focus on the General Assembly. And if 2/3 of the General Assembly are in favor of the resolution, then the resolution goes forward, right? So it's a veto override. This is inspired by a number of initiatives over the years: the Uniting for Peace General Assembly resolution of the 1950s, the Liechtenstein proposal. It's a way in which we keep the fiction that countries continue to have the veto, the P5 continue to have the veto, but now this veto has to be subject to a much higher threshold before the resolution is actually vetoed. So to illustrate, in February of 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. The Security Council puts forward a resolution telling Russia that it is violating the UN Charter, that it goes against the very principles, the founding principles of the UN Charter. It asks the Russians to get out. Russia vetoes the resolution. The resolution went to the General Assembly. The General Assembly, by a vote of 140 some countries, basically issued its own resolution that was stronger even than the resolution in the Security Council. And in our system, because 144 is larger than 2/3, then the resolution would have gone forward, not vetoed by Russia. So this is the way that we are addressing the issue of the veto. We think it's a sensible step forward. It allows the P5 to continue to be engaged because in a formal way they continue to have the veto, but now subject to a higher standard. I will stop here. There's a lot more that I could say, but I know that we have a period of Q&A, and also I will stay on until later on in case there are other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lopez Claros, for that very insightful presentation on those proposed changes to the UN Charter, with a view to making it more effective, given the many, many changes that have taken place in the world since 1945. So now I'm going to open it up for some Q&A. So let me just read some of the questions. One that we've received through the chat is, you said in the past, we have to redefine the concept of national security and prioritize spending in human capital. Can you explain that further, please?
Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Okay, just one sec. So I'll just read, it's a short question. You said in the past, we have to redefine the concept of national security and prioritize spending in human capital. Can you explain that further, please?
Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. Look, our concept of national security has been too militarized. When people today talk about national defense, and of course politicians are all for national defense, they usually mean boosting the military budget, spending more on weapons, ensuring that the military has the capacity to defend the borders of the country and so on and so forth. What we're arguing in the second UN Charter is that concept of security has to be broadened. It has to be framed in terms of human development and human security. Let me illustrate by giving you what I think is a very, very compelling example, right? Does anybody know how many people died in the United States between 2020, 2022 because of COVID? More than 1 million Americans lost their lives to the pandemic. More casualties than in World War I, in World War II, in the Korean War, and in the Vietnam War. The 4 most important conflicts in which the US was engaged in the 20th century. So an airborne virus left a nuclear power with the strongest military in the world, completely impotent, to defend its population. And we had more than 1 million casualties, right? So security has to be framed in a much broader setting. Security has to do with having strengthening our ability to educate our young people so that they have the skills and the knowledge to operate in a rapidly changing and more complex global economy. Security has to be spending enough resources in improving our readiness for the next pandemic, which will surely come. It has to do with financing and having the resources necessary to finance the transition to a green economy and so on. Unless we frame security in these much broader terms, which fundamentally have to do with human development, we are going to be essentially fiscally irresponsible. We're going to be spending more and more resources on weapons of destruction that ultimately, the utility of which will be questionable. You have seen in the last few months how warfare is changing very, very rapidly. A small country like Ukraine has essentially been able to to stop Russia on its tracks, notwithstanding the overwhelming military superiority of Russia against Ukraine. We have seen what has happened on Iran in the last few months. This whole notion of asymmetric warfare, the ability of smaller even countries, to withstand military pressure. So it's clear that we need to rethink entirely our approach to security. And the second charter argues absolutely convincingly that it has to be framed in terms of human development.
Thank you so much. There's several questions, but I'll just make a bit of a selection of some of them. Okay, let me see. From Dr. Lopez C. You've worked inside global institutions for decades and now involved in thinking about what a renewed UN framework could look like at a time of climate disruption, inequality, and youth disengagement. What structural change is most needed so the next generation sees global governance not as a legacy they inherit, but as something they have real power to shape?
This is a very, very important question, obviously, and thank you for posing it. I think that over the last couple of years, I have made presentations of these ideas and the second charter, in multiple settings. I've talked to young people, I've spoken to diplomatic academies, to UN ambassadors, to think tanks, and so on. And what is really surprising not surprising, but it impresses me is this sense of alarm that you see in many places. The sense that we are not in a very sensible path in terms of ensuring a future of prosperity and peace and stability. And so, how does one change this very toxic dynamic? I think one option, obviously, is that we need to, as voters, as private citizens, as people who are engaged in, especially in the context of democracies, we need to be far more savvy in terms of the people that we bring to positions of authority. We don't take our responsibilities as voters very seriously. Very often we're swayed by demagoguery, by empty promises, by unscrupulous politicians, and then we find, much to our surprise, that these people don't have the solutions to, as they claim, to the problems that we face. So I think that part of the solution has to be, civil society playing a much more responsible role in terms of not only electing our leaders, bringing in people with integrity, people committed to serving the public good, not using power for enrichment and for simply feeling that they are exercising power for its own sake, right? Education obviously has to be an important component of this. In our school systems, from very, very early age, we need to inculcate in young people the notion of global citizenship, the notion of our interdependence, the notion that our first loyalty should be to the human family, not to our particular tribe, whatever that tribe may be, our ethnic group, our religious group, our nationality. In those countries where these efforts have been made, you have seen great benefits. Canada, for me, is a very good example of a multi-ethnic society with a great deal of diversity, where, because from early age, already for several decades, they have introduced the concept of global citizenship. You have a country where, in fact, there is very little intra-ethnic tension, and there is a sense of nationhood that goes beyond, these particular divisions, whether they be ethnic or religious.
Thank you so much. So there's several questions. I'm sorry, just to make a selection again. What about including human values in consideration while framing the next UN Charter? What about including human values in consideration while framing the next UN Charter?
Absolutely, absolutely. I had said that this second charter you can download as a PDF from the homepage of the Global Governance Forum. I invite you to look at the Article 1. Article 1 in the 1945 Charter is basically the purposes of the United Nations are, and it lays out what the UN is for. We have significantly expanded the list of responsibilities or purposes for the revised UN. The UN in 1945 did not get into issues of, for instance, extreme poverty and malnutrition or climate. Climate, perhaps not surprising, because the scientific consensus had not yet solidified around the issue of the greenhouse effect and the impact of economic growth on carbon dioxide concentration and so on. But in terms of extreme poverty, we already knew that this was a very serious problem, and yet the state of development economics in 1945 was still very much in its infancy. And when the delegates at the San Francisco conference began to think a little bit about, what is the UN for? Their focus, as I said before, was very much on peace and security, preventing emergence of war, and so on and so forth, right? And yet, in the revised charter, we have a commitment to living within planetary limits, respecting the environment, recognizing our interdependence, working towards the elimination of extreme poverty, doing something about malnutrition, which is a scandal. We live in a world with a $120 trillion economy. The productive capacity of our global economy is at an all-time high. And yet we have, 700 million plus people who are malnourished. As a result of that, their cognitive capacity is undermined. They are a burden to themselves and a burden to our society in the future. And, in a context of enormous wealth and resources, to have people who in the early years of their life don't have enough nutrients to develop fully their cognitive abilities is really a sad commentary on our economic system. So yes, in this way, we are incorporating in the charter very much a vision of human values based on solidarity, tolerance, interdependence, recognition of each other's basic humanity.
Thank you so much. One final question. I think there's a lot of questions there, but just one last question that we have time for. You wrote that the current UN Charter makes concentration of power vested in the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. Thus, Article 109 opens the door to member states to review and amend the Charter in the future. Could this work?
Thank you for raising that question. It's something that I should have touched on my remarks. The Global Governance Forum in 2023, 1 year before we published the second UN Charter, we actually issued by 20 Nobel laureates and dozens and dozens of former heads of state, prime ministers, and noted politicians, calling for triggering Article 109 in the Charter, which is the mechanism which the Charter establishes for amending the Charter. There is a kind of an interesting historical footnote here, which I will quickly share with you. At the San Francisco conference, there was a group of 17 countries, including the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Robert Fraser, who took great exception at the introduction of the veto in the Security Council. They basically said this is going to turn the organization into a powerless body, because it won't be able to resolve problems between the major powers and their allies. And this has shown to be true, multiple times in the history of the UN. So to placate these 17 countries, which also included many countries from Latin America, Mexico, as well as others, to placate them, they introduced an article in the Charter, the famous Article 109, which essentially said that within 10 years, we can convene a conference with a 2/3 majority of the General Assembly, and today it would be 9 of the 15 members of the Security Council. And we can at this conference examine, the adequacy of the charter in light of changes in the meantime. This conference has never been convened. By 1955, we were in the middle of the Cold War. The Soviets, the Americans, even the Brits had no interest in convening a conference and rethinking, the privilege that was conferred on the P5, through the veto. We have been arguing that because we face these global catastrophic risks, because our future is under threat, because the UN is increasingly marginalized, from global problem solving, we should convene that conference and we should have that conversation about, what kind of a UN do we want? And we think that the second charter could be a good starting point for that conversation. We're not saying that the member states should adopt the second charter. What we're saying is that the second charter provides a pattern. It is a possible starting point for a conversation as to what that charter could look like. So thank you for raising that question. I think we are in the middle of a campaign to persuade member states, to convene that conference within a few years, because we think that the mechanism exists. It just needs to be utilized. It needs to be triggered, and it cannot be vetoed. That's an important point to remember. The holding of a conference cannot be vetoed by the permanent members of the Security Council.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lopez Claros. We're really treated to a wonderful presentation and such an important topic as to how we need to go forward for world governance through this second United Nations Charter. Let's really support all the developments that can take place in this direction. So thank you, everyone. Once again, I apologize. We couldn't go through all the questions in this short period. Our next speaker is Mr. Masoom Senexai. Masoom Senexai is a distinguished Afghan peace negotiator. He's a former senior government official and research affiliate of the University of Melbourne's Initiative for Peace Building, as well as an honorary fellow of the Asian Institute and a member of the International Association of Academicians for Peace, Asia Pacific. So with over 3 decades of experience in governance, security, and peace processes, Masoom has held key leadership roles in Afghanistan's transitional and republic governments. Mr. Senexai will speak on the topic, the importance of ethical leadership, multilateralism, and diplomacy. So let us welcome Mr. Masoom Senexai.
Thank you very much, Greg, and thank you to other panelists. And I have an honor to join you and the other panelists in marking this important International Day of Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace. I very much enjoyed the previous speakers. Particularly Mr. Dr. Augusta, who has shed light on the very important topic of the Charter of the UN and the global governance and its renewal, and which is the core of the issue, which is over the past decades, I think everybody was debating and discussing about that, and it is part of the issue that we are facing. I think when we are talking about the multilateralism, diplomacy, and ethical leadership, I think the first thing it is coming to our mind, it is about multilateralism. It is about the collective decision-making. It is about collective security. It is about the collective peace for all, which it means that it is a public good for everybody. And for that reason, I think it is the core of the issue if that is undermined or eroded. At the same time, diplomacy means that we are doing something to prevent. And if we are to prevent the wars, if we want to pursue the negotiation, if we want to implement the UN Charter, I think that is requiring a kind of a robust diplomatic efforts in order to have the negotiation, to have mediation, to have all the different aspects that we were talking about. I think one of the key issues that was also mentioned, that we are facing with enormous challenges, and I think since the Second World War, according to the IRC, that the recent reports, there are more than 130 active conflicts around the world. And I think the amount of money that is being spent on military and in general on war, I think it is annually between the 90 to 20 billion dollar. And in addition to that, I think it is kind of making, in according to the World Bank, I think it is also making 10 to 12% of the global GDP. So, I mean, it is a huge amount of money, resources are being used for war. But how about the peace side? I think this is why the importance of the UN, the importance of the multilateralism is becoming more and more important. I think one of the important issues is that whether the UN is still relevant and effective, how much it is effective. And I think Dr. Augusta very nicely outlined that we are in 21st century, we need the reform, we need to have the changes. But yes, absolutely, we need that structural changes. But what about the behavior? What about the ethic of the leadership? If we have the best of the charter, but if the people are not respecting that charter and not kind of following the implementation, and there is no real enforcement mechanism, that those who are the powerful, who are also made accountable to implement that. So for that reason, as he also very nicely highlighted about the UN Security Council role in this whole issue of the role of the United Nations. And I think from a practical point of view, coming from the background of the very kind of a 40 years of crisis in Afghanistan and in a different level in a different time, I think any of the resolution that was implemented until that time, there was a consensus in the UN Security Council. I think there was relative success. As soon as there was that consensus was eroded and there was a differences, and I think those kind of Security Council resolution that had lost its effectiveness. It means that particularly in the recent years, the changes that we are seeing in the global kind of prices of the global governance system, and particularly with the recent changes in the US policy that has also triggered the policy and the polarization of the whole world. I think that is also a very significant challenge, even to the adaptation of the new UN Charter or the implementation of the existing UN Charter, because that is the biggest in the core of the problem. I think one of the other issues is that the international legal norm has also kind of eroded, and unilateral action are on the rise, because many countries, particularly those with the global power, are using the Article 51 of the UN Charter in a way it is expanding with the name of the self-defense, but it is used in a different way for a kind of intervening in other countries, rather than to really, it means for the kind of really the national defense or that is a legitimate kind of justification for that. I think adherence has become also inconsistent. For instance, Guterres, the UN Secretary General, has mentioned that the UN Charter is not in an optional menu. It is the bedrock of international relation. If that charter is undermined, it means that you have the disruption in the international relation, and it will be very difficult to make accountable the countries who are making the accusation or they are making kind of action that is illegal in accordance to the UN Charter. Dr. Augusto also talked about the veto power often resulted in the political deadlock, and we have seen it in the recent so many recent years, and particularly in the recent conflict, from the conflict in Gaza, the conflict in Ukraine, the conflict in Afghanistan, the conflict in many other places. Because in the past, the global power were involved in a kind of a deterrence kind of approach. They were using their power to deteriorate and to kind of prevent kind of escalation of more larger scale of war. But at the same time, yes, they had their own supporter. They were vetoing on that side. But once the global power enter into direct kind of a local or regional conflict, it become extremely very difficult in order to get the consensus of the UN Security Council or to agree on any of those issues. And particularly when they are deciding that they will go without the resolution of the UN Security Council to war, or without even their national congresses that they are going to war, I think it will create a very concerning environment to the implementation or adaptation of the resolution. So that will require a more and wider global kind of efforts in order to really generate the kind of a force that is needed for the adaptation of such reforms. The UN Charter is also depending on the political will, whether the countries and those countries who have the significant voice in the Security Council or in the General Assembly. And I think if those changes that I read the report, and if that is adopted, and I think that will be really changing the kind of way how the global governance will work in the 21st century with the realities that we are facing. But if that is not adopted, what we should do with the existing charter? This is a big question about whether we are able to implement even the existing charter, which is also a very important question. We are on the geopolitical fragmentation and tension also deepening the division in competing narrative is also preventing the consensus in the UN system. I think the locus of decision-making is shifting from a collective multilateral decision-making. It is shifting to individual country-based or group of country-based kind of a decision-making. Again, the UN documents is also highlighting the very famous saying of UN Secretary General that we are witnessing a dangerous drift away from multilateralism at a very moment it is needed the most. And this is the moment that the world is really needing a collective decision-making. And we are frankly saying that. We are saying that there's the whole world is saying one thing, and then like the General Assembly, 140 countries, 130 countries are deciding on something, but one country is vetoing, and then nobody can do anything about that. And that is basically, even in very small issues or very critical issues like the ceasefire. I think if those kind of a situation is vetoed, that is really the danger of escalation of war to a broader spectrum. I think what is missing here is the leadership. The ethical leadership is the missing link in the implementation of the UN Security Council or the UN reform. I think I hope that the proposal that is both for the structural reform of the UN system and at the same time for the ethical kind of a reform or the leadership reform is also essential, and that will complete the way that the UN system maybe function much better and to reduce the bureaucracy. And I think I have worked with the UN system, and I think the bureaucracy is, over the years, it is building, it become very complicated, and even to implement that kind of a bureaucracy and becoming very costly, which will be very difficult as we see these economic cost is increasing in some countries, kind of not being able to provide their share of contribution, and it become the UN system become more dysfunctional because it is also depending on the resources, on the support that the international, the member state is providing. I wanted, it was in one of the point that I want to mention, but Dr. Augusta very nicely mentioned that the UN system should not be a system of the states, but a system of the state in the people, because that way you will bring the voices of the people of the global community, and that will be where the accountability will be more strengthened. And I think that is something has to happen. But how to happen? I think it is still very complicated. I think one of the other issues that now the issue of militarization and isolated strategy, because many countries prefer that their national interests will say this and they will oppose one thing or another thing. But they don't realize that unless we have an improved situation, improved economy, improved health, improved environment, improved peace or security for all, I think none of the countries will have better serving their national interest. And they will be, these isolation will make the world economy much worse. They will make the environment more degraded, and that will more people will suffer. So for that reason, I think there is a need for a commitment that for the issues to be peacefully resolved rather than to use these kind of a forceful or the use of force. I think how the mechanism can be strengthened, that the use of force will be prevented. And I think that is one of the issues that may be further kind of strengthened in the new resolution. At the same time, I think in many cases, diplomacy is shifted from dialogue, from respect, from the human rights, from the rights of minority, from the rights of the countries who are suffering from the conflict. I think it is used as a tool for imposing their ideology and their using their might instead of diplomacy, which is backfiring. I think we have seen in Ukraine, and I think those issues could have been solved between the two countries in a meaningful dialogue, but they use the force, and that is becoming more complicated, and that is continuing. And I think the same issue is when today we are talking about the Strait of Hormuz, how it should be open, but a few days ago it was open. It could have been discussed rather than to destroy so many lives, so many infrastructure, and to bring the shock to the whole kind of a world in terms of the energy crisis. One other point that I wanted to mention, it is about the use of these AI kind of supported military technologies, because AI is, there is no doubt, it is helping, it is the cream of the human kind of a knowledge. It will be helpful in many different areas, from health, from environment, in other areas. It will be also important in the military sphere as well, but it is a very critical issue that will need a kind of new rules in the global governance, that how the AI is used, because AI, if the new weapon system that is controlled by AI, the human control is reduced, and who will be accountable for a mistake that a machine is making a decision for that. And it will also typically that any kind of a decision that is made by the AI-driven kind of weapons system, and the destruction that causes with a small mistake, it will be enormous, and it can escalate kind of a conflict in different countries. And then it changed the meaning of the national sovereignty, because you can fly a drone, maybe by a non-state actor, to another country, and and use it for kind of creating tension between the two countries. And I think that is sometimes happening. And even there was an incident that was recently happening in the Pamir corridor in Afghanistan, which connect the three countries between Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, and Tajikistan. And there was rumors that there was a drone flying from that kind of a triangle area, and flying into Tajikistan and killing the Chinese worker in a project. And who has done it? And it was accusation to all the different countries. So, I mean, these are the practical examples of how the UN system can be strengthened if those changes and those reforms are adopted, but that will not be enough unless there is commitment from the leaders, the world leaders, the ethical kind of a commitment to the implementation of the Charter, and also to the reform. So the challenge is not just about the reform of the institution, but also about the restoring the trust, upholding, sharing value, exercising responsible leadership, renewing commitment to those principles is essential to fulfill the Charter promises to the future generation. At the same time, to move forward, states dedicated to these values should come together to influence and take the lead. These united efforts will generate momentum in applying political pressure to revitalize the UN system as effective, and that the proposed changes is adopted. Thank you very much. I don't want to take more of your time because other speakers have talked about.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stanekai, for that very insightful presentation, and where you highlighted particularly the need for ethical leadership, multilateralism and diplomacy, and that the UN Charter, structural changes are one thing, but then the implementation, the accountability to those structures, the behavioural changes is very, very important thing to, and that the missing link is ethical leadership. Thank you so much for that very, for the benefit of your wealth of experience in this area. Our next speaker is Dr. John Ballabonce. Dr. Ballabonce has 40 years of experience in international peace building and education. He currently serves as the Global Vice President of Sun Moon University, South Korea, and is the Asia Pacific coordinator of the International Association of Academicians for Peace. He holds a PhD in computer ethics and recently published a book, Values in the Digital World. Dr. Bellavance will speak on the topic, the relevance of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the age of artificial intelligence and global interdependence. This will be followed by an introduction of the IAAP, Asia Pacific, and its peace-building framework. So join me now in giving a warm welcome to Dr. John Bellavance.
All right, greetings, everyone. I'd like to use my presentation and I'd like to share my screen. Let me just get set up here. All right. Look, I'd like to cover 5 points. I'm going to do this within my best, within the time allocated. Look, we do live in a global village and we need shared values. I'll talk about that. Obviously, the role of AI is a big topic right now, and it must be guided by values. Scientific and economic development, as we all know, has to be guided by values. Climate change, any development really has to be guided by moral values. And we also need to consider polarization, us versus them mindset. A lot of politicians rely on this for their careers. And finally, interfaith dialogue is required. So if we look at the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, if you get AI to analyze it and you ask it, okay, what are the core values of the UN Declaration of Human Rights? And these come up, respect, justice, peace, shared humanity, accountability, a lot of the words that we were talking about. And as Gusto mentioned, this is part of our core mission at Universal Peace Federation and Academicians for Peace, and that is to foster global citizens. And global citizens need to have universal values. Now, my argument is we are living in a global village. I happen to be living in Australia, Gusto, and I'm actually Canadian, and I'm proud of the multiculturalism of Canada, but I'm also very proud of the multiculturalism of Canada and Australia. When we look at Asia Pacific, we can see that the immigrant population by millions is really right now creating a global village in Australia and India and Malaysia and Pakistan. But also we see that there is a great deal of religious and cultural diversity. Malaysia, Canada, Nigeria, the United States, Australia, we see this religious and cultural diversity. So the big question has to be within Malaysia, within Canada, and so on, are we really in the age of global citizens? And I think Augusto was presenting a positive side to this. And I want to share with you the experience here in Australia. The Scallon Foundation does very serious work. And this is the report from last year that 83% of Australians believe that multiculturalism has been a good thing for Australia. Wow. Now, that's the positive message, isn't it? And that is that young people in Australia, or even older generation Australians, kind of gotten used to the idea that we're living in the global village in Australia, and it's actually not a bad thing. We can enjoy food and culture and music, and you get all these multicultural festivals all over the place. So that's the positive side. The negative side of that is that politicians and individuals still use the us versus them mentality in the media and social media to polarize us. And I'll get to that in a moment. All right. So where are we? Look, I happen to be a great advocate of artificial intelligence. I think we could do much with it. But although it offers extraordinary promise, some of the top people in the world in the AI space are now saying, actually, that we have to really slow down. In other words, we have to slow down because we have to put in place certain human-centered values. As this former High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mary Robinson, said, because it can undermine our common humanity. Now, this is a critical point because the second point is that artificial intelligence needs universal values. So my presentation today is that clearly we need universal values. We need it because we're in the global village, but also we need it to manage technology. So no company, most of the experts in this field, the big AI companies, they're not really talking about, okay, how are we going to manage this and what happens if we reach the artificial intelligence reaches the point where it's able to manage itself and make decisions for us. They're not really focusing on that. It's like providing a medicine in Australia and around the world. If you bring in medicine, it has to go through legal and safeguards to make sure that these medicines are healthy and good for people. So the focus now is competitive advantage, is more important than working together. So why? We need shared values in that space. Paul Epping argues that the promise that intelligence can solve everything is risky. We will need a huge amount of capability, but without a soul to guide it. Moral Machines came out with a book and saying, well, we have to teach the robots right and from wrong. And most of us would say that maybe we have to teach individuals right from wrong, hence the need for shared universal values in that space. The United Nations has come out with support for AI, and it said, well, AI should definitely support human rights, peace and security, sustainable development, and global equality. The big, however, is that the UN cannot impose regulations on any countries with respect to artificial intelligence. The third is the obvious one. I think we all know that science needs to be guided by human values, and that's why academicians and scientists really understand that science is not neutral. So there is often in popular culture is that science is neutral, it's a useful tool, but actually that is not right because it's not neutral because it depends on the directions we give to science. And as Albert Einstein said, morality, the most important human endeavor is striving for morality in actions. The fourth point I want to cover is the concept of us versus them. So in Australia, I noticed we live in a country where all politicians talk about how wonderful multiculturalism, whether you're on the right or the left or the center. And I'm sure it's true all over the world that, we like to say that, we like multicultural societies. However, there is still two debates going on at the same time, and that is that politicians will say, oh, we love multiculturalism, but we don't like people on the right. I consider myself the left and the right. Our founder came up with the idea of not left wing or right wing, but head wing. Head wing means that we view ourselves with a common humanity identity, not a common enemy identity. So although multiculturalism and the global village is working well in the minds of many, social media and the world we live in clearly shows that there is this common enemy identity that is being mobilized. In a very good essay about how university students in Australia should have conversations, right? And they basically, a lot of students that studied this, or they did a study and they started difficult conversations, they didn't want to say anything because will this be politically correct? Or if I share my view, someone's going to come down hard on me. So the idea is in the age of loud moral certainty that actually there has to be this understanding that we are humans, that we don't know everything. And part of the methodology of UPF has always been to start from a position of humility and to say, you know what, I don't know everything, but I'd like to share my views on it. And having shared vulnerability in this study with students became, it really had some success in opening up conversations and getting rid of this us versus them. Final point is interfaith dialogue. I had opportunity to hear this cardinal. He's the youngest Catholic cardinal at the moment. He lives in Australia, and this is what he said about interfaith dialogue, which is one of the core activities of UPF to promote interfaith dialogue, because actually in a study that was commissioned by our founder, the 80% of religions have basically the same shared values, and there's about 20% of a variation. And this cardinal said interfaith dialogue is not an optional extra for peaceful times. It's nice to talk about it. It's actually a moral and spiritual duty, especially in moments of global tension. It's a way of safeguarding the dignity of every person and ensuring that our societies do not fracture under the weight of fear and misunderstanding. This brings me now to the second part and the final few minutes of my presentation. I'm inviting you academics, many of you I know already who are part of Academicians for Peace, and I thank you, my dear colleagues, for being here. Some are new. We've been getting to know each other on LinkedIn, and many I don't know. But I just want to share with you that we have been making we have been moving forward. And we've been moving forward based on the 6 pillars of our federation. And the founders talked about 6 pillars. And I can say this, that in order for us to have peace, we have to manage ourselves well. Our founder many times said this. In other words, to have peace in the world, you have to have peace within yourself. I know that sounds like a warm and fuzzy idea, but in fact, it's critical. If I'm not at peace with myself, I will cause problems within my family. It'll affect other people. So we have to learn to bring peace within our relationship. So managing our relationship and building strong families is one of the core work of our federation and of Academicians for Peace. And of course, the third pillar, managing our natural environment. We published a book recently based on those 3 pillars. And my second call for this meeting today is 1, please contact me. At the end of the slide, you'll see my email, but it's also in the chat. You can have a look. The second book we're looking at now is Global Citizenship, which will be published by Academicians for Peace, which is Universal Values, Interdependence, and Mutual Prosperity. So my argument today is we live in the world where these, and I think I'm well supported by our speakers about the need for universal values and ethical leadership and building, educating citizens as global citizenship in the future. So together, interdependence, mutual prosperity, and diversity, they form an integrated vision. They're not separate. So when UPF and Academicians talk about interdependence, and I want to bring that in because if you're interested in submitting a chapter for this book, even if it becomes 2 volumes, we're happy to do it, is essentially that interdependence and mutual prosperity means we are all connected to each other. We're dependent on each other. And it certainly affects our economy when we look at what happened, the COVID pandemic. We quickly realize, oh my goodness, what happens in the world here is affecting me. And this is certainly the way we should think when we look at the current situation. So our interdependence and our prosperity is clearly related, but it's clearly related and can be guided by shared values so that we can have justice and ethical well-being. So with that, we'll catch up. Those of you, if you see my email there, those of you who are interested in joining Conditions for Peace, please get in touch with me. If you're interested in working on this book that we were working on, please get in touch with me, and we will be catching up in late May. Thank you for listening. I appreciate your time. I'm grateful for your attendance. Thank you. Over to you, Greg.
Yeah, I'm not on the screen. I'm just wondering.
Well, you are actually. I can see you.
Good. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Balabons. That was a very enlightening presentation, and thank you for highlighting the fact that in order to have peace in the world, which is a very, very diverse world, we need to have a paradigm which transcends our differences, which is that we are one family, and that there are values that are universal that are needed in order to create peace in the world. So thank you so much. I'd like to now introduce our final speaker for today. He is Dr. Abul Wali Islam. Dr. Islam is a medical doctor and also a scientist. He has a PhD in immunology from the University of New South Wales in Australia. And he is a former academic at the University of New South Wales and a scientist at the Prince of Wales Hospital in Sydney. He is Vice President of the World Association of Australia. He's also an Ambassador for Peace for the Universal Peace Federation, and he currently serves as a Global Vice President of Sun Moon University in South Korea. So Dr. Wali will speak on the topic, Framing Remarks Linking Multilateralism with Health Security, Social Cohesion, and Sustainable Development Outcomes. This will complement the broader diplomatic and legal perspectives presented so far in the program. So let's give a very warm welcome to Dr. Wali Islam. Sorry, Dr. Wali, you must be on mute. We need to hear you.
So I start because time is very limited. We wanted to finish possibly by 3:30. So I just want to refer to Dr. Augusto Lopez-Callero's remark about COVID-19 pandemic. And he actually gave a data that the pandemic caused so many deaths that few top world important wars didn't happen. To reframe it, a single pandemic for roughly 24 months plus minus caused human catastrophe that many wars together didn't. It's just not human life, the suffering. People were scared, couldn't go out of home. So what does it mean? It is so important. As an immunologist, I understand it very much. Now, that is gone. The other day, I was with my a medical facility. They say, have you had your COVID immunization this year? I said, no, not yet. Remember, it is coming back, and it may come back much more deadlier. So what I'm going to say, the intersection of multilateralism, health security, social cohesion, and sustainable development are so intertwined that we can't really isolate one from another and just focus on one thing. Now, health systems, particularly if you look at immunological or biological system, we see that biological systems do not operate in isolation, and therefore it can refer to human societies that don't work in isolation. The semi-interconnectedness that governs immune responses within the body also shapes relationships among nations, institutions, and communities. Therefore, if we could understand better how our immune system and health work, we could understand better how we should govern our societal differences, and we could actually get together as one. A very simple example I want to give. When we look at our body, different parts of the bodies look different. They function differently. Eyes look different from their hands, completely different. But they function differently as well. However, when they work in coordination, our body functions properly. If the eyes sees a mosquito is biting here, if the hand doesn't go there, then it doesn't work. So meaning that our organs or body parts look different, function different, but could be only beneficial if they work together in cooperation, in coordination. The same way human societies, multilateralism, multiculturalism, multi-faith, if we give these three examples, are different. But if they work together, the society, the world would be a better place and will be peaceful, will be more secure. I was talking to one of my friends the other day in relation to one of the Quranic verses saying, "Wala tafarraku," don't go from each other away, stay together. Don't go away from each other, stay together. So fundamentally important to me that can prevent, it encourages diversity, but it prevents going away from each other. And when we go away from each other, we only look after our own benefit. It starts a big chaos. Within ourselves, starting from peace with myself is important first. And then to my near families, to broader societies. So what, in my short talk, I wanted to say, look at our body. How different our organ systems, not just externally, but also internally. If you see, the liver does not look like kidney. The functions of liver differ from the functions of kidney. But if they work together cooperatively, then our body functions better. Otherwise, not. Looking at our own body, we can also see one thing very clearly. We can see the body, we can see the body parts, but we don't see which is more important than the body itself. That's the spirit. That's the mind. Whatever you call, that's the life. So religiously, or even humanitarian context, if we want to say, it is spirit. The spirit is more important than the body itself. If the spirit is not there, the body doesn't function as it should function. For example, a lifeless body has no value. People try to get rid of it as soon as possible. But if the body has the spirit, has this life, it can do a lot of things. So therefore, we must acknowledge and nurture the importance of spirit, moral values, and working collaboratively, cooperatively to make our societies peaceful, more secure, and better living place. So with this, I finish my short talk, but I would be happy to answer any question from your end. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wally. That was a very interesting and nice presentation. And thank you for that beautiful analogy of the body. We are one body of humanity, so we certainly need to stay together. We need to also enlist moral and spiritual values in the quest for universal goodness. So thank you so much. A very, very nice presentation. I'd like to now have a photograph to commemorate the event. And I'd like to ask everybody to open up their cameras and let our technical staff take a photograph of our participation today.
Now, the trick with that is you have to keep smiling for about 2 minutes.
Tech team, please let us know when you have finished.
Is that completed now? Got a clap there? Okay, so thank you everyone for that. I'd like to hand over to Dr. John Bellabons to conduct our concluding Q&A and open discussion. So let's welcome again Dr. John Bellabons.
Thank you very much, everyone. I want to thank you all for patiently being patient. And so let's have a few questions and observations. First of all, I want to thank all of you, but I also want to thank the international leadership of UPF we have that have come here from around the world. And I also want to thank the leaders of all the peace-building organizations. And I'm really grateful to my colleagues, distinguished professors and academics that have come, educators, community leaders, and religious leaders. And I'm grateful to you. So at this stage, I am not sure if, Greg, if Augusto is still here, but if we're able to get Dr. Wally, Augusto, and Masoom, they're our colleagues, to just be on the screen, and we can open it up a little bit to discussions and observations. But I want to mention one thing first, is I would be really happy if we could give the current members of Academicians for Peace the opportunity to ask a few questions. And I'll just mention a few that are here. Dr. Joseph Masika, Professor Fan from Sydney, Professor Swarup. I'm looking at Dr. Syed Fadel, Jacinta Moreau. And if you would like to, I feel like I have to give you an opportunity to ask questions first or make a few comments. And then we're among friends here, and we can continue this conversation. I just want to say while you're all here, I think this theme of the UN reform and so on, I think if I may, because we have leaders internationally here, Mrs. McLaughlin who's here, and our president of UPF, that we could really continue looking at the role of the UN and helping the UN and fulfilling its role. I think it would be a fantastic initiative on our part. So I'll open it up to, I'll have to scroll along, to members of the committee, if you'd like to even share a few thoughts or ask a question.
Yeah, John, it's Joseph here from South Australia.
Yes, Joseph.
Yes, number one is to say, look, thanks so much for this wonderful and very powerful seminar which we are holding today. You know, it's well organized and we appreciate, and I think we need many of these because the issues around the world happen nowadays. We need to have a very candid conversation and the discussions, and also everyone to know, because when the United Nations was formed, we were not there. Some of you were there, but others have just come born after United Nations being formed. And I was following up with the first presenter for the narrative to the way he took us, the ambassador, from step to step until where we are today. And it's quite amazing to see that the four founding fathers, they knew why they need to have United Nations. And also they anticipated it's not going to be like a bread and butter, but it's going to be something which needs to be evolving, needs to be changes needs to occur all along, and eventually to come to the position which is better for the world. One thing which I needed to find out more information and to see what can you do is for the continent of Africa, because Africa is 55 countries. It's not like America, where it's one nation. So to have the whole of African continent with not being permanent member of United Nations, that has left it also vacant in my mind to say, okay, we need a reform, but probably this reform hasn't gone far to consider Africa as a part of the permanence, to have a permanent position on the United Nations, not only this 6 years term and the 3 years term. I said, look, you know, but otherwise, I say, look, this conversation is so good. This forum is so important, but we don't need it to have once in a year, but at least we can have each quarter. I'll be very happy to see we're having this conversation. And we can make sure that the young ones who are going to be the custodian of the United Nations, the global citizens, as John put it about multiculturalism in Canada and Australia, how it is wonderful. So we hope that one day we'll be there. So thank you so much, all the presenters. You are wonderful. Your contribution is so powerful, and you are so knowledgeable on the subject matter. And we look forward to build up on the steps which you have established. You have launched up the step. You have given us the launch pad, and we are going to build on that one there. So thank you once again, and I wish you more further discussion and good weekend.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Nelson, you've got your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself and share your thoughts with us.
First of all, being ambassador for peace, I just want to say a greeting of peace in each society and each culture and religion. I give respect to everyone. Congratulations for organizing a wonderful event. And and I also want to say congratulations for our dear Reverend Stone who organized everything. And thank you very much. And this event was started with Dr. Hamad, and that was a beautiful word I like from Holy Mother Hans, and he repeated that to live for the sake of other, and we are one family under God. And when we ended with the last speaker, Mr. Abdus Salam, he said that with the example of a human body. So human body has different parts and different functions, and he connected with the multiculturalism and interfaith. I love interfaith. I love multicultural, multilingual, multi-faith, interreligious, and interdenominational work for peace and humanity. And today we have learned many beautiful lessons from our dear speakers like Dr. John Bellavance and Dr. Mosom, and also Augusto Lopez. And we are also having a lesson from different speakers that we need peace in this world. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your efforts. I appreciate your knowledge. Lord, I pray for all of you. God, give you more wisdom and strength and knowledge so that we can work together to spread peace in this world. And God bless all of you. I pray for global peace and global healing. And my question is that just quickly, I just want to we have one of the speakers mentioned about the global challenging, and about also in some countries, I don't want to mention the names, where there is a discrimination of minorities. So how United Nations, what is the role of United Nations to remove all this discrimination or like this type of situation, and how we can learn, or how IAAP can play a role to remove all these things? This is a very simple question, so I just need clarification. So thank you very much.
Look, I'll take that one. Without a doubt, we live in challenging times. So I'm a simple man. I grew up in Canada, and I grew up in a little neighborhood, and I never imagined I could do something on a global scale. The answer is that the more like-minded people come together, the bigger we can create movements. We clearly need a values renaissance, as our speakers pointed out. Short answer, Dr. Nelson, is that we really need to build momentum, and I think we can do it. I'm a great believer from a small thing. I don't have time to explain, but from small things, big things can come. But I want to give the time. First of all, I want to give Ina, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Nigan if you would share something too. I know you've got your hand up, but Ina from Indonesia, would you share your question, and then I'll take Dr. Nigi's question. Ina, are you with us? Or would you like me to read it? Okay. You're saying, please allow me to ask a question to any speaker. What significant knowledge can we share with the students in the universities to keep them aware of peace values, human rights, whereas they also watch the world leaders who are involved in transnational conflict? Great question. Masum, what's your thoughts on that one?
Thank you. That is really a very great question. And I think the young generation, the university and students, and also the schools, we have to start educating what it means peace in a very simple words for the people, for the students, for the young generation. But at the same time, it is how they will be transforming into the next generation of the leaders and how they should be made to be committed to peace from their childhood, from their adulthood, until they get to the leadership position. So I think it should be part of the curriculum. It is again depending on universities, on their curriculums, on their policies, but at the same time, it is also a collective effort by the states that how they can help and inform the students, the young generation, that they understand what is happening and what is the danger that they will face in the future if this status quo or this ignorance of the leaders by their action is continuing. And strengthening an institution that is working for humanity, they have to have more learning. They have to be connected with the system so they understand that how the global system is working. If they don't understand that, I think it will be difficult for them to realize how that will be impacting their life in the future.
Thank you, Masoom. Dr. Nii, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the questions, please?
And inviting me in this wonderful and meaningful conference. I just, I don't have more questions because I've been quite vocal throughout the session. I just want to share one of my experience that I did my doctorate on vision of a global village. And when my RDC was going on, so I was asked a question that is it possible that vision of a global village is anyhow practical? And I was very young at that time. And I told my heads of the department and the jury that if man can think of landing at moon, why can't we think of living in peace with our neighbor, right? And as you said that, John, as you said that AI, we think that science is the solution of all the problems. But yes, it's not. It's not. Because, if we do not add humanity, because if the mind, we have to understand that mind and body are the tools of self, right? But whenever we go for AI, they are giving more importance to mind. And I keep telling my student that mind is a wonderful servant, but a dangerous master, right? So what I believe as a very humble teacher in a very struggling nation for its existence, I just want to say that when people, these superpowers like the 5 nations who are having vetoes in their hand, as long as they think that, they do not give consideration to the people, to the weakest in the society, gender of the society or the nation of the society, there's no point. So framing of UN Charter is really need of the hour. And if these 5 nations think that okay, fine, we'll be fine, and the rest of the world has to suffer. No, it's not like this, because coexistence is the core of human existence. This is my view. And harmony and relationship. So these 3 are the pillars of any peaceful society. So if I think that I'm in peace in my country or I'm in peace at my home, let the world be in fire, it's not going to work. So we really need to understand this. And thank you so much, John. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Everyone,
what you said is really, really critical. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to try and go through the questions. Professor Fan, you're a member of our Conditions for Peace in Asia Pacific. Would you like to, you said you'd like to have a time for a question. And I have seen Saren, who's got her hand up, and also Dr. Chandrika. So we'll go in that order. Professor Fan, the question is up to you now. The floor is yours.
Professor, you need to unmute.
Okay, listen, Professor Fan, we'll come back to you in a minute. Maybe Saren, would you like to, you've got the floor. Go ahead, ask your question or make your comment.
Thank you so much, Dr. John. I just firstly want to say that thank you to everyone from the IAAP for creating this platform to hold discourses around social justice and enabling community advocates as well to come on board and listen to work that's being done and all the concerns. And whereas, there's always room for criticism, but my question was more so building on the point where Masum had touched base on, which is pretty much my question before, around early education. So how does the UN address power imbalance in that sense in terms of peace building, particularly for communities that have historically been excluded from decision making? And in the context of Australia, I've witnessed firsthand working with young people who have been subject to being educated about the negative connotations from their the parts of the world, for instance, like slavery or the colonization here in Australia. And so rather than them being part of society and feeling a sense of belonging, they've actually built in resentfulness rather than feeling like they're part of Australia, for instance. So how can the education system from a young age be able to support more equitable peace building outcomes rather than creating a division between young people who may not look like, those who are in power, instead of building, that hateful resentment sort of feeling towards everyone else?
Okay. Thank you. I'm not sure who'd like to take that one. Wally, would you like to have a go at this one, or anyone else, really? It's a really good question, and I'd have to really think of that one through. It's a profound question, which, on the surface, can I answer, my dear colleague, that we have to start from a position that we don't know everything. We have to start from a position of a common humanity. And unfortunately, although, in Australia, we celebrate multiculturalism, there's still this underlying concept that, our group is right, your group is wrong, right? Or our group has the power and your group doesn't. Or we're still, in a way, very juvenile in the way that we approach our conversations with each other. So to me, there's a great deal of room in terms of humility, in terms of heart and service that is needed. Dr. Wally, what's your thoughts on that? Make sure you're unmuted there, Wally, because
talk about multiculturalism, I want to more focus on cultural competence. I work with the University of New South Wales, and we found that, yes, multiculturalism is a good thing. You showed it at the beginning in your slides, John. But How about cultural competence? How can we behave, think, program ourselves, respecting the culture of others? Here we lack, I believe. For example, when I was working with the Prince of Wales Hospital, I initiated a project with the Royal Women's Hospital there. I said to the nursing head, said, the way you are dealing with just mainstream women in taking care during pregnancy and delivery, if you take same way for women's of Bangladesh culture, Bangla culture, the impact will be different. We may fail in giving proper care because their thinking is different from the mainstream culture people. So we need to bring cultural competence. We need to focus on that area more than, because we understand multiculturalism have been very widely spoken word, multiculturalism, but there is not enough focus on how to bring cultural competence within the societies, within the politicians, within the professionals. That is where I think we are lacking, and that is why we are failing, not really progressing. That is expected by us in the Australian societies. Does it make sense at all?
Yes. Pardon me. It does make sense. It's just looking at it from when we talk about peace building and talk about the United Nations Charter and all the amazing pillars put into place to support humanity in itself. Whereas then now you have an institution that does the complete opposite. I'll speak, for example, having a young person I've worked with where, again, they've come into Australia. Of course, they're extremely happy. You know, they have opportunities here to go get education, to have a great job, you know, to build themselves up, and being away from war and going into a system, an institution where the curriculum itself, perhaps it might be, you know, from the intention of it's great to teach our history of how Australia came about or any other country, Western country came about, and, you know, going from where it used to be war and now we're working towards a more inclusive society, where every child has the right, you know, to an opportunity at life. However, in the building of that, being taught, you know, the negative connotation of where you're coming from, being thought of how your country was colonized, and shared in the fear and, you know, all the horrific aspects of things that some parents still carry that trauma to today. That innocence gets stripped away from them again, which makes when you talk about the cultural competency, but then it's just a matter of, so how best would you then say those who advocate for young people that are going through that division between who they are as a young person or even their heritage, where they're coming from, and finding themselves in a new society now, that also tells them, look, this is exactly what you are. It's what we say you are, and that is the negative aspect of things. And so when that child then goes about and say, you know what, because I don't feel like I belong anywhere, because Australia is all that I do know of, I'm going to behave the way the system labels me as, right? So that more panic and that division between who they are. And so how do you sort of go about in supporting that child for, you know, those sort of division within themselves? Because yeah, it's one of those things where it's quite difficult and complex to with the hierarchy, the power imbalance, those who are at the top, creating curriculums that tells them, no, you must learn the history, although it may be damaging to you as a young person. So how do we sort of get to the young people, advocate for them before they get to a point where they start to behave as the negative label that is already placed onto them before they logically get to that point of understanding exactly who they are?
Thank you. Again, what an amazing question.
May I please?
Yes, go ahead, Masoom.
First of all, thank you so much for having
very
me.
important question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, is that Dr. Fan?
Tuong Fan, yeah, Tuong Fan. Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to talk about that one and then Masoom?
Sure, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. Fan will go respond and then Masoom, you can jump in. Is that okay? Go ahead, Dr. Fan.
I think my frame of mind is go together very closely with your question just then. And also within the framework of the first speaker talking about the role of IAAP as providing an opportunity for rejoin and articulate into a cohesive peace. Multiculturalism, we can drive, we can say anything, slogan and things like that for years and years and years. But at the moment, at the global scale, we still see wars happen, can't stop. And at the lower level, lack of confidence. The child cannot join into the big classroom because of where he came from and he did not know who he was or how to blend it into society. And I think we already take years and centuries to do all this, and the progress is very little. Even though we say that, yep, good outcome results, so and so. But from my day-to-day practical living, the multiculturalism is not practical just yet. Talking point, yes, but not, because ethnic group in each community seem to be holding hand, but not holding hand together is multiculturalism. And that is what IAAP should put in curriculum. But first of all, you as a member of society, you have to educate it yourself. If you don't start with self-education, you can't stand up and do lecturing to the whole group of young or old people. So I have tried to do that, and I tell you, it's very difficult. So we have to be joined in hand more cohesively and make our mission to be successful. Very hard, very difficult, but we have to do that. We have to look at from the curriculum and from the practical community point of view, how do we allow the child who have different color, who have different languages, and can be confidently hold in hand and put up the hand and say, may I have a question, please? And that is something that we have to really have so many meetings, have so many writing to put it together step by step to go ahead. It's no miracle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fan. Just so we keep the conversation going, I will Masoom, if you could share your thoughts. I see the hand of one of our colleagues, Dr. Fadel. After Masoom, I'd like Dr. Fadel to share, and also Selba Gondoza, if you would like to share after that. The floor is yours, Nasrum.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned, that it was a very important question, and we are living in a not perfect world. Everything is changing, and there is not one solution for all these different problems. But one of the things that can happen, because these young people with a color or with a different kind of a background, they face with the identity crisis. And I think one of the issues that the society, the school, the family, and the community, all of them, even the government, they all have a role. The UN is setting the principles. It is like setting the standards that what is good for the humanity, how that should be. But it coming down to the state, how they are be made accountable to take those kind of a principle as a seriously, that how they can implement it. And then it is going down. But the peace builders, those who are the peace builder, their role is that we say that we do the mediation, we do the kind of a bringing the different people together with the colors, non-colors, those in power, those filled with the injustice. I think the peace builders' job is that to bring the people under the same environment and to talk with them in the presence of others, not in the isolation, so that they hear the stories of others rather than just to take them in isolation, that you have faced with those atrocities or those differences or those psychological kind of lack of direction or identity. I think that will not work. Multiculturalism is not an artificial thing. It is coming from the practice. It is coming from the actual equal kind of a treatment and justice. And I think if that is there, that will gradually make an impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Fadel, the floor is yours.
Okay. First, I want to thank the organizer of this very important event. And I'm proud to be part of this dialogue. I have learned and I have listened to the very important presentation that presented by the speakers. Thanks so much for every one of them. And I hope that the summary of that presentations and we can get by email or to send it to for us. That will be very important. And I don't want to take more time because I think that many people want to share. I don't have question in that moment and just wanted to thank everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fadel. Yes, this is being recorded, and so we'll be sharing them on the UPF Asia Pacific website, YouTube channel, I'm sorry. But also I will be writing a report, so there'll be a long version and a short version. All right, Selba Gondoza, your hand is up. You've got the floor. You need to unmute yourself. Okay, I'm just going through quickly the feed on the pictures and see the hands up or not. I guess at this stage we could wrap it up. It's been a long, almost 2.5 hours. Unless there is someone else at this stage with your hand up, I think I'll pass it on to Mr. Greg Stone, who will basically conclude remarks. Wait, I think, Dr. Wally, you've got your hand up and you're smiling too. How can I refuse? After Dr. Wally's remarks, Mr. Stone, the floor will be yours. So, Dr. Wally, you need to unmute yourself.
I have written a summary version of centering the point, we often talk about war crimes, but we never identified waging war is a crime. Meaning that we can go for war, but if we kill innocent people, women, children, then it becomes a war crime. But we don't acknowledge waging war is a crime. If we could do that, possibly we could prevent war and its impacts. So I just want to tell my colleagues here, if that is an important point, then I can send his summary version of it to John Bellavance, and then he might circulate it, see what could be the views and opinions of enlightened society. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. John, for that very enjoyable Q&A and open discussion, allowing many people the opportunity to contribute. So thank you so much. And in closing, I would really like to thank all of our speakers. They have done a great job. Thank them for their wise and informative presentations and for everyone's comments and questions. Thank you also to IAAP and to UPF for organising this important event. And a big thank you to all of our participants for your deeply appreciated interest and support. Thanks also to the technical team and the staff who made this online webinar possible. So please stay tuned for future IAAP events. And I'd like to just have a quick word. The next UPF event is for another of the pillars of UPF, which is the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace, IAPP. The next event is coming up in May, which is next month on the 16th, on Saturday. The title is The Role of Parliamentarians in Reducing Polarization, Advancing Unity Beyond National, Religious, Ethnic and Political Divides. So please stay tuned and join us for that as well if you can. So thank you again. Please have a very enjoyable rest of the day. I'm not sure what time zone you're in, but please enjoy the rest of your day. God bless you all, your families. See you again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Greg.
Bye, everyone.
Great job. I'm going to hang around.
From Indonesia.
Hey, I'm going to hang around a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
you guys want to ask
everybody.
questions or have a chat?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
God bless.
you.